Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll give it just a minute for everybody to join us in our Zoom room today. We are very excited to have all of you here with us for this panel on what is happening with Model United Nations conferences this year. I know over the last couple of weeks, we've gotten a ton of questions from student leaders and from advisors, and the number one question has been, what is happening with Model UN? How do we prepare our students and what can we expect this year? So I am really excited. We have an amazing set of panelists with us here today to answer all of your questions and to help you get excited for this Model UN year as well. Before we get started, I would love to get a sense of who we have here with us today. So if you feel comfortable introducing yourself in the chat, please feel free to do so. Please feel free to share your first name, where you're from, and if you're a parent, teacher, or student, and what you're hoping to get out of this session today. We always have a diverse group of people that join us from all over the world, and I'd love to get a sense of who's here with us so we can make sure that we answer all of your questions today. And I also want to say thank you. I know many of you submitted awesome questions in advance of this event as well, and we'll be incorporating many of those into tonight's panel as well. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Yvonne. Welcome. I see we have an awesome teacher from Honduras, from a school we've worked with many times before. Welcome. Welcome, Andrew. Great to see some Model UN advisors and some students here. Hi, Simon. Welcome. Students who want to know what's happening with conferences this year. Absolutely. I think both delegates and teachers alike want to get a sense of what's happening and how do we prepare for it. So we will definitely cover that during this session. And if at any point you have additional questions, you are welcome to drop them into our chat box as well. And with that, I'd love to talk just briefly a little bit about what we're gonna do at our Zoom etiquette. I know we've been on Zoom a lot over the last year and a half, but just a couple of reminders. Please feel free to ask any questions you have in the chat, and please feel free to keep introducing yourself. Please also be respectful in the chat, no spamming or bullying or any of that behavior. And also feel free to engage, ask questions, write your messages. We have amazing panelists that are experts on Model UN and on what's happening this year, and they are here to help you. Welcome, Teresa. Welcome, Georgina. Welcome, Tyson. So great to see teachers and students from Mexico and Brazil and Texas and Chile. That's amazing. I think one of the benefits of being online is being able to connect and share resources with people all over the world. So great to see all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I briefly want to introduce myself. My name is Laura Goldsmith, and I'm the Executive Director of Partnerships at BestDelegate, which basically means I have the amazing job of getting to work with all of our students, all of our teachers, and all of the partners that we work with. We work with nonprofit organizations, we work with governments, and we've even worked with the UN to help empower students through Model UN. And I love Model UN and I'm incredibly passionate about it because it helped me become a better speaker and a more informed individual, and I've seen it transform the lives of thousands of students. I went to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, where I got to be president and head delegate of the Model UN team. And Model UN opened countless doors for me, including my first internships at the Carter Center and with Girl Scouts. And I am so happy that I have a career in an activity that I'm so passionate about, Model United Nations. So day in, day out, I get to work with all of our schools to help empower students through Model UN. So it's very nice to meet all of you, to all the returning faces and people, it's great to have you back. And to those of you who are new to Model UN, we're here to help. And without further ado, I'd love to share a little bit with you about what to expect during this event. So we're going to start by giving you a quick overview of what's happened over the last year. I know it felt like a blur for so many of us personally, as well as in the classroom. We're going to talk briefly about what happened with Model UN last year, and then we're going to really focus on looking forward. What is happening with Model UN conferences during the 2021-2022 school year? And we will get to hear from our amazing panelists, and you can ask your questions as well. So briefly looking back, the last time there were a lot of big in-person Model UN conferences was in January and February of 2020, right before the pandemic really exploded in the US. And that was a big transition because, you know, for many people, school stopped abruptly or changed abruptly, and the Model UN season was cut short for so many students. And last year as well, A lot of students were virtual, many were in person, but had all sorts of additional restrictions. So it was a very, very challenging year for students, parents, and teachers alike. But I want to share that Model UN did continue. And while it was challenging for many, there were many instances where Model UN thrived. Countless organizations were able to bring their conferences virtual, including Best Delegate. We ran monthly conferences that sold out almost every month with students joining from all over the world in a virtual environment. And one of the things that we were so excited about is that it made Model UN more accessible. Regardless of where you lived, it was more affordable for students to participate in this activity. So there were a lot of virtual conferences that happened, and there were some standout schools that also continued to do both virtual and in-person programming. And we have an amazing advisor with us who could share a little bit more about that today, John Remmell from Santa Margarita. I know they did an in-school simulation with their own students at the end of the year last year, and you can see Model UN looked a little different than it has in previous years, but it has continued to happen with outdoor unmoderated caucuses and negotiations and students continuing to thrive. So I just want to share that I know this last year has been very, very challenging for all of us personally as well as professionally. And we are here as a resource. We want to help answer your questions and help you prepare for the year to come. And that might be, a combination of virtual and in-person conferences. It might be that you have certain restrictions on you from your school or from your county, or even what you're personally comfortable with and what your students are comfortable with. And we want to help you build the right Model UN year for you and your students and your school. So I'm really excited for today. We have an incredible set of panelists that are really going to share with you what's happening with Model UN conferences in 2021. And we have a mix of student leaders from university large conferences, as well as organizations that run their own conferences, and a fabulous faculty advisor as well. So I will let each of these individuals introduce themselves and share a little bit about their Model UN background and experience so that all of you can get to know the amazing experts that we have with us tonight. And I would love to start things off with John Remmell, who is the faculty advisor at Santa Margarita. So if all of our panelists would like to turn your cameras on, we'll go around one by one and have our panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their backgrounds.
Hello, well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Good to be here with everybody. It's been a while since I Zoomed, so pardon me if I'm not great at it right now, but I'm getting back into it. I'm the faculty advisor for Santa Margarita Catholic High School, and we're doing an in-person conference Saturday with a little bit under 1,000 people. 20 different schools will be coming to our conference. So we're excited to do that. Today we actually started decorating our campus with the UN flags and getting all the chairs and tables ready, and we're going to set everything up tomorrow and be ready to go on Saturday. So we're excited for the school year. We're going to be a little bit different than our in-person conference where we did with just us. All the plexiglass divisions are gone from our school. Everybody's wearing a mask when they're inside. We're not going to be able to do outside informal consultations just because the 29 committees coming in and out would just be too disruptive. So we're going to do it within the classrooms. We have air filtration systems in all of our classrooms that hopefully will help filter out all the air, but we're hoping for a good start. The pressure's kind of on. Last year, we were in the Southern California circuit, the first one to do an online conference that we'd ever done for the people that we weren't the first online conference, but the first for our group. And this year, we're going to the first one going back in person. I'd originally hoped that we're going to be doing an opening and closing ceremony in our gym. I was going to call it the reopening ceremony, but we are not going to be congregating in our gym at all. It'll all be going to individual classrooms. No closing ceremonies, just go home when you're done. So kind of like a regular school day for our school right now.
Thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Chris Talamo. Would you please introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us all. My name is Chris Talamo. I'm the Executive Director of IMUNA, which runs the National High School Model UN Conference based out of New York City. Thankfully, I don't have a conference coming up this weekend, so I have a little bit more time to plan things out and get myself all set up, which I'm very thankful for. But yeah, just to provide a very quick overview, I mean, we're we were virtual last year, and we obviously, it wasn't the ideal circumstance. We wish that we could have welcomed everybody in person, but we try to make the best of it, and we try to have an educational experience for everyone. But this year we are planning for an in-person event. We're planning on welcoming everyone back, and we're excited to see Model UN get back into full swing. So yeah, thank you so much, Laura Beth and Best Delegate too for the invitation.
Thank you, Chris. Next, I'd love to hand things over to Skye from SUNS.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Skye Scrutin. I am the Secretary-General of SUNS, which is the Secondary Schools United Nations Symposium, which takes place each year in November in Montreal. I have been doing MUN. This is going to be my 9th year. Started in high school, so like many of you in the room, in the Zoom room, and like many teachers who are trying to teach your students about MUN. Trust me, I know exactly how it feels like. I was one of them. Yeah, so last year we were online. Our conference, similar to John, was kind of at the beginning of the MUN season. So we were trying, it was kind of an experiment for us, because our conference happens in November. So the beginning of the Canadian and also East Coast circuit. This year we're doing a hybrid conference. So we are running about 12 committees in person and 13 committees online simultaneously. We're super excited to welcome everyone back to the Sheraton Hotel in Montreal, and we're really excited to see how this format goes. Yeah.
Thank you, Skye. Next, we'll hear from Ben from NAIMUN.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Zeller. I'm the Executive Director of NAIMUN 59. So yeah, I've been doing Model UN for 6 years now, so nowhere near the 9 years, but still a while. And normally we welcome about 3,300 people to the Washington Hilton here in DC. Last year was virtual, obviously not ideal, as we've said, but so thankful that we've kept it going because we are so excited to welcome everybody back to the Washington Hilton in person next year. So we are February 17th through 20th. We're a little later, so we definitely have more time. We're not this weekend either, which is nice. But we are so excited to welcome everyone back.
Thank you, Ben. And last but certainly not least, I'd love to hand things over to Kevin Felix Chan, who is one of the chief executives and co-founders at Best Delegate.
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Felix Chan. So everyone also knows me as KFC, my initials. I am the co-founder and CEO of Best Delegate. And during COVID, so before this, we didn't really run that many conferences. We were known for our summer programs, summer institutes. During COVID, we started with these MUN online debates, which evolved into like these virtual MUN conferences, now rebranded as Best Delegate MUN conferences. And what we realized over time is that so many new students started doing Model UN because this was available, this was working, this was engaging. And so many students that just didn't have Model UN available locally because they never had in-person conferences near them were able to go to conferences for the first time. And so that made us a believer of permanently having some sort of virtual MUN conferences. Last year, we almost sold out all of them. We were running them once a month, and we sold out pretty much all of them. So this year, we have the same lineup again. We have monthly conferences at different levels for high school, middle school, and now elementary school, because we started elementary over the summer as well. So all 3 levels. And then within the levels, there's also beginner, which is really the most popular one we have, intermediate, which is going to be for most delegates who want to get some practice in Model UN. And then we're also doing crisis because we're getting a lot of delegates who are like, I don't know what's happening in crisis committees. Can I at least like practice it out at a real conference before I go to a real in-person conference? So we're doing those levels, and it culminates in what we call like the tournament of champions for all the award winners at the end of the year.
Thanks, Kevin. So I would love to do one more round with our panelists just so that students get an even better picture of what your conferences are going to look like this year. And specifically, if there's any unique features or things that are different with it being hybrid, or if there are any restrictions or requirements on a conference, I think all of that would be helpful to paint a little bit of a picture for advisors and students on what some of the different types of conferences might look like. And I know especially for conferences in the spring, some of that is still up in the air, but I think that's also important for advisors and students to know as well. So I'll go around in that same order once again. John, if you could start off by sharing just a little bit more about what this in-person conference is going to look like for everybody this year.
Yeah, well, I think normally our conference is usually a training conference anyway, because we are at the beginning of the year. We're a little bit weird this year because we have a lot of sophomores that are coming in to be trained for their first time doing in-person conferences. So we had a lot of schools that are actually sending more delegates than they normally would, because they're sending their sophomore students and their freshman students, because they want everybody to get introduced to in-person MUN, because their kids have never done an in-person MUN. All they know is online. Luckily, our numbers are a little bit down from what they are typically in person. We're normally more about 1,500. So we're going to be a little bit less than 1,000. Like I said, we're not using the gym, but the administration contacted me and said if we were going to use the gym and have more than 1,000 people, we need to have verified vaccination, like not a just I was vaccinated, but actual verification of the vaccination, or a test within 3 days. I was already planning on not using the gym, but that like really solidified for me, like I'm not using the gym, because for sure I don't want to collect that from 1,000 people 2 weeks before the conference. So, but I think that other than not using the gym, we're going to be largely the same that we would be in person. Well, not using the gym and masks for everybody inside, but other than that, it'll be mostly the same, hopefully.
Good luck, John. We know your conference is this weekend, and we can't wait to hear how the return to in-person.
Everybody seemed really happy that they weren't doing it this weekend, so I appreciate all that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the people sighing relief there is Chris. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about the plan this year for NHSMUN?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and also just I want to be mindful of the comment in the text box. So our conference is for mostly high school students, but each year we have also a good number of middle school students as well. I think for us, like what we're really looking forward to is kind of getting back to having the students debate in person, and also bringing continuing, honestly, the things that I think have made NHSMUN a different kind of conference. I think if anything, the ubiquity of everybody using Zoom for the past year is actually going to be helpful. So every year we try to bring in a guest speaker from most of the United Nations, if not like a university professor or an NGO person who's knowledgeable. But we used to be limited to who is in New York, because people weren't as comfortable using Zoom. And if you wanted to get a speaker, you had to get them to come in person and ship them out from wherever they were. But with these opportunities available, now we can kind of make a trade-off. Do we want to get more interesting person and have them come in over Zoom, or have someone come in locally and be able to really engage with the students? So the way that it transformed the world, I think, is really interesting in how we deliver our programs too. I'm sure other people are going to say this too. I'm not going to pretend like this is unique, but we're also being mindful of the fact that for many people, it's, especially if you're not inside the United States, it is difficult to get to the United States. So we are really trying to explore what kinds of online options are possible and the degree to which we can integrate them into kind of NHSMUN as a whole, to make sure that, just because you're in another country doesn't mean that you have to be locked out of the opportunities that are available. So like I said, we have a little bit of time before. We're still working out the exact specifics of what that's going to look like, but we are really keen on having a really great celebration in person, but also bring all those things, bring more people into the conversation, even if it's virtual.
Thank you, Chris. And next, Skye, would you share just a little bit more about SUNS, including the grade levels it is open to?
Yes, absolutely. So like I said, SUNS is running a hybrid format. And we really came to this decision because we do host internationally. We do get many clients from Canada, but also from the States, and in the past from different areas across the world. And so we really were prepared, because of not knowing when the border was going to open, not knowing what COVID policies would look like. We really decided that hybrid was going to be the best option for us. And so that's where we're going. It's going really well. So basically, we're going to be running 2 conferences simultaneously, one that is completely virtual and one that is completely in person. So there's going to be no like half and half committees, which was a question I think a lot of delegates were concerned about, because that is so strange from typical MUN debate. In terms of COVID policies, we are dealing with, I think, a very different situation than some of the conferences in the room, since we do take place in Canada and in Quebec. So we do have a mandatory vaccine policy that with the vaccine passport in Quebec. So we are requiring all delegates to be vaccinated unless they are under 12, then they do not have to be because it's not open for them yet. And we are requiring masks at all times, even when seated, and with 1 meter social distancing. So we've been trying it out with our McGill Model UN team here to see how it'll work. And so far it's been going really well. And we're really excited to bring that in-person spark back and really try to recreate the success of last year's online. We cater to a really wide range of students. So from grade 7 up until grade 12. We have different styles of committees. So you can enter into beginner, intermediate, advanced, depending on the style that you want across, GAs and ECOSOC, specialized agencies, crises. So whatever really is your style, there's definitely a place for you. And yeah, online has really brought us like a lot of really great opportunities, like Chris was saying, especially with speakers. Last year, because it was online, we got the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, to be our keynote speaker. This year, we have some fantastic speakers lined up, but I will keep it a surprise for now. But yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. It's a really great opportunity to be able to try these things out, even in such uncertain times.
Thanks, Skye. And we will also hear from Ben and Kevin as well, but I'd love to hear from all of the people here. What is your plan for this year? Are you thinking of doing a mix of in-person and virtual? Is your school allowed to travel? What are you expecting for this school year? Feel free to drop it in the chat and we can incorporate that into the conversation as well. But I'll turn it over to Ben to share just a little bit more about what everybody can expect at NAIMUN this year.
Sure. So I'll sort of describe NAIMUN first before delving into the COVID-specific policies. Also, a quick shout out to my high school advisor who's in the chat, who texted earlier, go Barons. Anyway, so NAIMUN is the world's largest student-run high school Model UN conference. So we cater to delegates from 13 to 19. We will have 40 committees, including 2 joint crisis committees that we're really excited about. You can find more about those on our website. But yeah, so in terms of COVID, we will be completely in person. We will also be complying with the rules and regulations in the District of Columbia. So that means that we will be fully masked and we will also likely be requiring vaccines. We do have more time until NAIMUN, right? We are February 17th to 20th. So luckily we have more time to sort of sort out the specifics, but that is sort of what delegates can expect from NAIMUN.
Thanks, Ben. And next we'll turn it over to Kevin.
Yeah, so the Best Delegate MUN conferences are only virtual. And what's different is that there's segmentation by different grade levels as well as different experience levels this year. So as we're recognizing that so many different students want to do Model UN, we are now doing the high school committees, as well as the middle school committees, as well as the elementary school committees, and those are on separate, those are separated and also on separate days, but they're taking place monthly. So there's those conferences, and then within the middle school level, there's actually middle school beginner, which is most popular, but there's middle school intermediate, and then there's middle school crisis, which is actually slightly more popular than middle school intermediate. So, so that's the 3 levels. And then at the high school level, we have beginner, which is also the most popular, intermediate, which is what we think of as like a regular, MUN conference, and then a crisis as well. So, and then what we think of as advanced is at the end of year tournament of champions for those who already received an award at one of the conferences. So that's all the conferences that we have, but it's a lot that we're running every single month with different segmentation, but it ends up being a better experience because that's what the students are asking from us. They're saying, hey, we want these type of experiences. And we also just want more opportunity to practice at our level as we prepare for in-person conferences. And so we recognize the importance of doing that versus just hosting, a MUN conference with a mixed lineup. Where they actually this year get to pick their committee. So when they register, they're picking their committee instead of being randomly assigned a committee. And that way they can choose the topic that they're interested in.
Thanks, Kevin. So we got a great question in the chat just now from Georgina, I think trying to picture what all of these conferences look like. The question is, how big are the committees? And I would love for that to be answered for both the in-person and the virtual conferences. So let's just do a quick round robin. John, would you please share for Santa Margarita?
A normal classroom size of about 30 or so students. There will be some committees that are smaller. Probably the Security Council will be smaller. And we do have a bigger committee, the General Assembly, which is actually in 2 rooms. So the fact that it's in a bigger room is the reason it's a bigger committee. But I'm not sure actually who's going to show up, but I'm hoping they're going to be around 30 students a room.
Great. Chris, what about at NISMUN?
Yeah, so I mean, I think with NISMUN and New York being New York, this is the kind of the big question that's a moving target for us because COVID policies have been an evolving topic in the city. But needless to say, we're like obviously paying really close attention. There will be like mask social distancing in the committee room, so they're not going to be as large as they traditionally have been, and we're going to make sure that everybody stays safe. What exactly number that gets us down to, that's going to depend on the mood of the City Council of New York, I think, more than many other things. So we're just going to have to go on a ride with them for a little bit.
Thanks, Chris. How about you, Skye?
So online, the largest committee will be 60 people. We find that if you go over 60 people in an online format, debate tends to not do so great. So we keep it under that. And with the smallest one being about 25 in a crisis committee. So really just ensuring that we have positive, really constructive debate. In person, our largest committee is going to be just under 100 delegates. Because that we are doing it in the Sheraton Hotel in Montreal, the spaces we're using are usually used upwards of 500 people, 600 people in these rooms. So there'll be tons of space to be able to socially distance, even meet with your block now, not have to meet in the hotel corridors. So definitely utilizing the space to our advantage. So yeah.
Thanks, Skye. Ben, could you share NAIMUN committee sizes as well?
Sure. So we are operating on a little bigger scale. So we are going to have our biggest committees, our GAs are going to be around a couple hundred. Luckily, we are in the Washington Hilton, which is an amazing space. It's actually where they have the presidential correspondence dinner. So if y'all can picture that room, it's huge. So we will still be able to distance well. And then that goes all the way to our smallest crises, which would be a little over a dozen. So we have a wide range of sizes.
Thanks, Ben. And how about you, Kevin, with the virtual conferences this year?
Yeah, the Best Delegate MUN virtual conferences are all around 30 students each, sometimes slightly smaller, sometimes slightly bigger, but 30 is the number we found to be optimal for a one-day conference where we want students to have multiple chances to speak, especially at the beginner conferences where it's a training conference, and for the intermediate where they get to practice multiple times.
Awesome. Well, I'm seeing some great questions in the chat, and it's also awesome to see we have a lot of people that are starting with virtual conferences, hoping to do some traveling this year. I know that students are really eager to do so. And so I would love to answer some questions first around virtual and hybrid style, and then we'll get into some questions around in-person and travel. And then we actually have gotten a lot of questions around general preparation. I think one thing we've noticed from a lot of teachers in a lot of schools is that some of that institutional knowledge and years of students doing MUN in person has faded. And so we want to talk about how do you reinvigorate your club. So we'll go through those kind of 3 different sections of questions for everybody. And to kick things off with some questions around virtual and hybrid, Georgina asked us, how can I motivate students who are honestly tired and a little bit burnt out from virtual and online conferences? And so I'll start that one with Kevin and Skye, who are doing in-person, a hybrid combo, and then also entirely virtual. So Skye, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a hard sell originally, online conferences. Even last year when people were first starting them up, I compete at McGill. And even for me as a university student, knowing that we were planning our own conference online, I was like, oh my goodness, like, what is this going to be like? What is it going to look like? And honestly, I think that there is just something special with MUN online. You still get that sense of spark of Model UN. You still get that competition. You still feel it, which is different from just like online classes where you go, you might not be super invested in the topic. You might be tired, or, you want to be messaging your friends. Whereas Model UN, you have students that are really excited to be there, have researched the topic, are excited to participate. And so that spark is still there, which I find so exciting. And also the fact that you do get to meet different people. Sometimes being so isolated during the pandemic, you don't know, what's going on, or you haven't met new people in a year, and that can be really isolating. So the fact that you get to go to an event and meet people that aren't from your school and aren't in your classes day to day is super thrilling. So I think that definitely those 2 things are a really good push for the online format, and definitely the hybrid format as well.
Kevin, any other tips to excite students about virtual programming and some of the benefits of virtual conferences as well?
Mm-hmm. So I think even within our own team and our own staff, the thing that they do is set intentional time for online bonding, which is different from online meetings or online debates, right? They have staff dinners together where it's just dinner time and they're chatting. They love virtual escape room. We've done like several of those. It's like they're so competitive with each other and gets that competition out of them. So things online can be fun too, but it has to be very intentional when they do it. And then when they transfer it to the actual committee experience, so that's for like when you're prepping your students. And then in the actual committee experience, what I found is some of the students, especially the ones who are still wanting to engage online, they actually want to talk about the topic. That's the reason why they're doing MUN, because there's no trip involved, right? So for them, we found that having like breaks as well as lunch break where they can actually just talk to each other about a topic, that's the time they actually want to connect about their passions. And then toward the end of the session, we also give time for them to just hang out and network, because so then they can meet people from around the country and not just do MUN and then they get the awards and they leave. It's time for them to like network and bond. So our staff actually have icebreakers and games that's associated at the end of the committee session. So I really believe that like there's opportunities to make it fun and to also make it an opportunity to like network with other students that you just otherwise wouldn't meet. But that has to be very intentional in the design.
Thanks, Kevin. We got a great question in the chat from someone that's new to Model UN. And the question was, how do we decide what conferences we should register for? Do we choose or are we assigned? How does that work? And I would love to turn that question over to our faculty advisor here today, who likely is involved in this decision-making every year for Santa Margarita High School. As a faculty advisor or as student leaders, how do you decide what conferences your group should attend?
Well, you got to usually find something that is local. Although now with the online, you don't necessarily need to have that distinction. Try and find a program that's going to offer you a good scenario. Like the SUNS online was great last year. We did BEARMUN online last year. We did SeaMonkey last year. Those were three of the best run conferences to me that our students are actually willing to go back to some of those conferences virtual, even though we have the opportunity to do online. So just look for a conference that seems like it's going to be interesting to you and your students. Maybe they have the committees that are going to be interesting. Maybe it's a level that you're interested in. And once you sign up for the conference, you're going to get assigned the different countries and roles that you're going to be at that conference. And you just have to distribute those to your students based on what you're assigned from the conference. Everybody wants to be a big 5 country, but that's just not going to happen all the time. You're going to be representing one of 193 countries, or a number of 193 countries, but everybody gets an equal chance at those countries. So especially for smaller groups, you may not get the United States, China, Russia, or something like that early on. You may get Vanuatu to start off with. So.
Thanks, John. And one other note I'll share on that, and Georgina is with us today, one of our program managers at Best Delegate. She's going to share the links in the chat. Best Delegate just released our annual conference database, so it's been updated. And if you are running a conference, either one of our panelists or one of our participants here today, please feel free to check out the conference database as well. And if you know of a conference that should be included in this database as well, there's instructions to get added to it. We've got hundreds of conferences in the database already, split up by middle school and elementary, high school and university conferences, and we'll be updating this resource throughout the year. And it also gives you the option to sort by virtual, in-person, or hybrid so that you can find conferences that work well for your school and your needs. So I definitely recommend checking that out. I'll share that again at the end of this call, but I wanted to mention it now since it was relevant there. And now I'd love to get into some of the questions that we have around in-person and travel restrictions. This is one of the questions that we've gotten from a lot of people, and I know much of it is out of the hands of conference organizers, but some of the questions we've seen around this that we got from Charlotte and Andrew are, what will travel to and restrictions look like at in-person conferences this year? And will there be any restrictions for overnight conferences or things that schools should bear in mind when preparing for that? So I'd love to start with Chris, if you'll share just a little bit about what you're seeing. And I think we had a lot of questions from people that were looking for conferences in New York this year too.
Yeah. And I think there's actually a couple more layers of restrictions. And I think that's one of the problems. If there's anything that's going to make it difficult for students to attend conferences in person this year, it's just going to be the complexity of actually organizing the trip. Because, well, on the one hand, you have the, city, state, national restrictions that are present where the conference is hosted. If it's in a hotel or a university, they might have their own restrictions. The attending schools, their administrations may or may not allow students to attend. And I know there was somebody in the chat who said that their administration, they were willing, but their administration wasn't willing to support any of the travel. So the issue that I think is that there are a lot of different roadblocks that can come up. And unfortunately, kind of like Laura Beth, you said, a lot of those are not in my control or even the students' control. A lot of these things are external forces. So, one of the things that we're always trying to do in general, but especially this year, right, is really make sure that we're reaching out to every single person, making sure that we're understanding like, hey, what's your situation? What are the obstacles that you're facing? Because it's going to be a different story every single time. And if there's anything that we can do to make things happen, open doors, persuade the right people, I don't know, talk to an embassy or something, we're going to want to at least try to explore that option for folks. And if there's a way to make it happen, we're going to try to make it happen. But I think the complexity of it is just going to be very challenging for students and teachers this year. And not that I'm responsible for it, but I'm sorry about that. I feel just complexity that we don't really need in our lives at this point. So.
Absolutely. One of the other things I'll recommend too, when people are looking at conferences, Model UN conference organizers work so hard and they do their best to provide an amazing experience for everyone. But I would also recommend you check out the cancellation policies and the refund policies for conferences, because you want to, do what's right for your students and your organization as well. And I want to turn that question over to Ben. I saw you posted in the chat as well. One of the things NAIMUN is doing to try to help people sign up, but also bear in mind that circumstances are continuing to change. So Ben, do you want to add anything about travel restrictions or cancellations for people to be aware of?
Sure. So I think Chris kind of hit it on the nail there. Obviously, like there are just so many different layers of complexity, and being in DC, we will have sort of restrictions here that may not apply everywhere else in the US. And so even just domestically, it's so convoluted and so complex. We are trying to emphasize communication as much as possible. We will be posting content updates on both our FAQs page and our specific COVID FAQs page that we have on our website. We also have a newsletter going out every month updating advisors about sort of the different like policy updates. We are working tirelessly to like keep up with everything that is happening in the world about COVID, and we want to be as helpful as possible. So whether that's like Chris said, with like visa letters of affiliation, or just helping sort of circumvent those complexities in any way we can. So that is for us, like also considering extending our refund policies, as well as if a delegation cannot attend because of a like COVID imposed restriction, a full refund there. And so those are sort of things that we are trying to be as helpful as possible, because it is out of y'all's hands and it's out of our hands as well. And so that is just, we were trying to emphasize communication and transparency as much as we can.
Thank you very much, Ben. And I think across the board, Model UNers do this because we're passionate about it and because we love it. And so I think just talk to conferences, find out what their plans are, ask questions when you have them. That will definitely help you determine, can you do in person? Can you do it now? Or is it better to do it later? What's right for your school this year, and how to create the right blend of scheduling. I would love to move into a series of questions we have around preparing for conferences and rebuilding your teams. We got a great question from Genevieve that I'm going to direct to Kevin and also to John around how can I rebuild my team after a year and a half of virtual or no programming, and revamp club meetings, revamp preparation. There's been a lot of that knowledge lost, and we want to rebuild the momentum. So Kevin, could you start us off with some recommendations on how to rebuild a team, or for those advisors that are starting a new team, how to build up that excitement and get a team going?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear from actually other teachers, but from my perspective, it's been almost, for some teams, it's been a year and a half, and that's like half their, a high school experience. So in that sense, it's almost like starting a new team and taking that mindset of how do I come back with the beginner's mindset and start off with some training conferences, start off with reminding people, here's what a mock session looks like, and going to those one-day practice conferences, maybe picking up a local one-day conference if you can. Those are like very low barrier to entry, and getting that warm up. I think that's the key, is not expecting, hey, everyone's just gonna turn on and then we're all of a sudden gonna look like 2019 or 2020 again. It's a process, and you have to rebuild the club, rebuild the culture, rebuild the bonds between the students, rebuild the logistics and the safety aspect of it. So I think a lot of it is just coming in with patience and a plan and just mapping out, okay, we don't have to do everything immediately, but if I were taking over a club, for example, or starting a new club, what are those steps? And let me try to check off some of those steps first before I try to do more new things.
Thanks, Kevin. And I will also have John answer that question, but I know we have a ton of amazing advisors here today that are very experienced, as well as student leaders. So if any of you have tips as well for starting your club back up, activities that you recommend, anything of that nature, please feel free to share it in the chat box as well. So John, would you please share some tips that you have for clubs that are building back up?
I'd say you do the same thing as you would with just starting a program, is that you just need to get to a conference. Start small, maybe have a little simulation in your own classroom or club or wherever you're at. But if you don't have enough experience with your group to run one, get to a conference, whether it's online or in person or whatever, and just go to a conference. And once the kids go to a conference, they really start to like kind of run with it, and they get excited about doing it. And find a conference that's going to really like be something where they can participate in person or online. And once they participate, they're just going to love it. And then they'll run it all for you once they've experienced, and they'll get their friends to come in, and they'll build the momentum up from that. But you just got to get to a conference and get some experience with that. And once they do that, there'll be some that fall in love with it. There are going to be some that decide it's not for them, but that's probably good to get them out too. But the ones that love it will really love it and run with it, and those will be your leaders.
Thanks, John. Would any of our other panelists like to add anything else on how to build up a new team or rebuild an existing team?
I'll chime in quickly. I don't want to belabor the points that other people have brought up, but and this was brought up a little bit before, but the joy that comes from IMUN, it comes from actually doing it. I know a lot of kids who are just like, they like the weekly meetings or whatever their school is organized as, like, that's just kind of a touch point for their teacher or their friends or anything like that. But they love going to the conferences and they love the moment. And I would even say it's hard to really understand IMUN like until you get to that first conference and you get through that. And I just wanted to plug that one way to do that is to go to a conference, but another way to do that is to like just pull the students from your group together, or maybe even just like invite one other school, and like you can just host a really short, quick conference that kind of gives you a taste of the experience, but it can happen like on your schedule without having to organize like country assignments or anything like that. It can just be a really quick and easy way to get people back in the mindset and remind them like, oh yeah, this is why I love this so much. So that's just my quick plug.
Thanks, Chris. The next question I'd love to have us answer is a question that came from Katie. She asked, what does a typical MUN year look like, particularly for a high school student trying it for the first time? What might a schedule look like for the year? And any of our panelists who want to answer, please feel free to. I know we have student experience as well as advisor experience. Any of you who would like to answer this, what might a typical year look like for a student doing Model UN for the first time?
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it depends on where you are and what MUN circuit you're in. For example, I'll talk to my own experience as a high school delegate, or when I was a high school delegate, I competed in the Montreal Model UN circuit. So it kind of started, the first one was SSUNS, which I now get to lead, which is awesome. SSUNS at the beginning of the year, and then kind of ending off, and it went from November all the way to the end of the year. So like April, May, but it completely depends. And it depends on your school of how many you want to go to. But what I would suggest from a learning perspective is try to select some key conferences. So some smaller ones that are in your local areas that are, starting up, that are really like small, that you get like a niche kind of experience, and then some big ones that have been going on for years that are well developed and can really get you a more professional or more closer to what you'll be looking at a university experience, to kind of more advanced committee stuff. And then you want to have like weekly meetings, or maybe every other week meetings, to kind of learn, what is Model UN? How do I walk into committee prepared? What is debate like? What are the different styles between GAs and crisis, and like learning, so that when you go to a conference, you're ready and not just going in blind. And I know that Best Delegate has some amazing trainings, so you can also, I'm sure, sign up and get some excellent trainings to be able to go to conferences and feel prepared and ready to do your best and potentially leave with a gavel.
Thanks, Skye. And on that note, we had a lot of great questions around how do I prepare for a conference? One advisor wrote in, if you only had 1 hour to prepare your students for a conference, how would you do so? And I think on the other end of it, we had some teachers and some students asking, how do you recommend we prepare for a beginner conference or a longer conference? So I'd love to have a few of our panelists share, how do you recommend a student prepare when they only have a limited amount of time? And also when they have more time leading up to a bigger conference as well. So Chris, would you like to start us off with that one? How do you recommend students prepare for conferences?
Sure, yeah. So, all right, that's kind of a fun question. If you only had an hour to work with them, how are you going to pull that off? I think it's going to depend on your priorities. In my mind, I think priority number one for that new student is you have to get them to enjoy the conference. And the only way they're going to enjoy the conference is if they go and give a speech. In my experience, at least, and maybe I know every student is different, generally students are more keen to give that one big speech and feel accomplished and sit down than like go and do like dominate their unmoderated caucus group or whatever. So if I only have an hour with them, I'm going to like work on the opening speech. I'm going to show them how to do it. I'm going to give them tips on outlining it and really make sure that when they give that speech, they get to walk back to their seat or mute themselves if they're online, like with that real feeling of like, yeah, I ran that. I was so good. Like, I feel so empowered by this. If you have more time, something that I did, something we maintain is I have the beginner and advanced delegate guides that we push out every year. And we're just getting ready to put out our edition for this school year. I'll drop the links into the chat, but basically I took my curriculum back when I was teaching Mod UN in classrooms, and I kind of put it into this summarized online version. So I'll drop it. It's just available online. And if you want to look for like a longer term program you can work on, I'll encourage everyone to check out those links.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Would any of the other panelists like to add anything else on preparation?
I was going to say, I think that sometimes for the first conference, it's probably better to have a shorter preparation period because you're not going to really know what you're doing until you go to the first conference. After you've gone to the first conference, then you'll be able to maximize your time preparing because you're like, oh, okay, that's what the opening speech is. That's what the unmoderated caucus is. Like now I understand all the stuff that's going on. So sometimes having more time to prepare incorrectly for what you're going to do isn't really a benefit. So sometimes having a shorter preparation window. But oftentimes I'd also say, you know what, go to BestDelegatecom.
And on that note, Georgina, would you please jump into the chat? We don't have a how to prepare in 1 hour guide, but we do have a how to prepare for conferences in 2 hours or less guide. And it starts with Chris's tip. First, it says read the background guide, but after that, it gives you recommendations on how to prepare your opening speech. And it has some great video resources, especially if you're a new advisor or if you don't have students that know how to teach other students how to give those speeches. There's a great hook point action video that teaches you how to give an opening speech and a lot of awesome other resources in there. So Georgina is going to drop the link for that in the chat in just a few minutes for us as well. So please, I recommend checking out that resource. There's also a video resource library on BestDelegate.com that has a ton of training videos. So if you want your students to watch a video on how to write a resolution before they go to a conference, they can check that out. There's videos on how to give speeches, on body language, on all of those other types of things as well. So Georgina just dropped in the beginner delegate guide, the advanced delegate guide, and we'll also give you the how to prepare for virtual conferences guide, which is the one that gives you the 2 hours or less how to get ready for that first conference. And one other thing that I'll note too is feel free to check out what conferences are training conferences and what conferences are more advanced conferences. I know Best Delegate, for example, has training conferences that are designed for new students where it is more of a guided experience throughout that conference. So same thing, I know conferences earlier in the year are traditionally more designed for that training experience, but check out each conference and see what might be the right fit for your students. Another question that we got is, what advice do you have for first-time MUN teachers or first-time MUN students? We have a lot of people that are new to Model UN and just want some advice on how to get started with this awesome activity. So I don't know who would like to start us off with that, but what advice do you have for new teachers?
I was going to say, you can fake it with your students because they don't know that you don't know. I know that I started 25 years ago. I had to teach freshmen what Model United Nations. I didn't know what Model United Nations was. I actually was in charge of running our conference, even though I'd never been to a Model United Nations conference before. I'm not exactly sure how I did it, but I think that getting good student leaders is really important, because the students are really the ones that run Model United Nations, for better or for worse. They're the ones that are going to lead it and run it. Luckily, I came into a situation where the students already knew what was going on. I wasn't dealing with a bunch of newbies all around. I had seniors and juniors and sophomores that all done MUN before. So in terms of, I just kind of let them run the conference, and I kind of watched and figured it out. But I'd say it goes back to just go to a conference. And once you go to a conference, you'll see how it's run. And it really makes a lot of sense once you actually go to a conference. I tell people it's like learning to swim. You can't do it without water.
Yeah, I want to add on to that is when you go to a lot of these conferences, try to meet as many teachers as possible, especially in the in-person conferences. They're usually, I don't know if they're still doing it, but there's a faculty advisor lounge where you get to hang out. And because that's how my teacher did it. I was in an MUN club where my teacher didn't have any MUN experience, and how he learned was he talked to different teachers. And I remember our training guide was some combination of like 3 high schools, Edison, Tustin, and Mission Viejo. I think like 3 high schools like training materials, because those teachers were generous to like give out a couple of tips to my teacher, and that became our school's training packet. So talk to the advisors if you can at the different in-person conferences. Or if you're trying to do it virtually, nowadays there's the MUN Advisors Institute, or which is the next one's in November. I actually see a couple alumni here. I think Andrew and Maya are also here. So now you can actually get formal professional development for teachers. I think John, you taught at one of them. You taught a session at one of them, I think last year, was it? But yeah, we have the Advisors Institute as well. But I definitely recommend talking to other advisors, especially at the in-person conferences.
Absolutely.
I want
One
to.
more. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I just want to quickly plug too. I mean, talk to the conference organizers. I know a lot of teachers kind of like get anxious. You think you got to get professional, but like the conference organizers are either like the most hardcore Model UN nerds who are still learning, or they're just people who literally could not pry themselves away from Model UN, like me and Kevin and Laura Beth. So like, I honestly, one of the most rewarding experiences of my entire professional career was I got a chance to help a Native American student who like wanted to build this like kind of inter-tribal delegation to come to one of our conferences. And they were so new, and like he had a background as a delegate, but he had no idea how to organize it. And like, I was so thrilled. I would spend hours just kind of talking through, here's how you train, here's how you register, here's how you prep. And I would do that all 5,000 times over again, just because it was the enjoyable part of what I do, right? Like we all fell in love with it for a reason. So, I mean, we're here to help too, honestly.
That's a great point. I think not only are, the advisors at conferences happy to help, but also student alumni from clubs are often happy to help, even if they've graduated. I know I still help out my high school from time to time. And I know Ben's advisor is here today. Don't feel free to reach out to Ben. I'm volunteering him. But oftentimes alumni from schools are super excited to give back too. So don't be afraid to contact former students, contact the conferences that you're going to, and check out the Best Delegate resources as well. One more question we got is from Natisha is, are the topics for conference delegates, are they their choice or are they assigned? This varies by conference. So at some conferences, students will actually select a committee. I know this year Best Delegates virtual conferences are doing that. Some conferences, schools will be given a certain amount of slots, and then the teacher will select which students get which of the school slots. And then at some conferences, they'll assign everything. So it varies by conference. Check out their website for details on how the delegate selection works there. And now I'd love to do one final round of all of our panelists. And panelists, if you could just share again for everyone how to sign up for your conference. And if you have any final tips for everyone, any short tips or a word or a sentence to share how you're feeling about the Model UN season overall that's ramping up right now. So we'll start again with John. If you have any closing tips or recommendations for everyone, please feel free to share those.
Well, you can't register for a conference because it's Saturday, but I'd say just go ahead and get involved and do whatever you can. Get those kids to conferences, whatever it is, virtual, in person. The students, once they get into Model United Nations, will really love it. So if you need any assistance, reach out to anybody that's close to you. I think I could probably share my email in the chat if anybody wants to email me, but I'm happy to help. A lot of people helped me get started. So reach out to those people around you and go to a conference, and it'll really make sense once you go to a conference.
Thanks, John. Next up, Chris.
Yeah, you can register for our conference. It is at www.nisman.nyc, or you can just Google NISMAN. That'll probably take you right there too. In terms of overall attitude, honestly, it's excitement. I am excited to start seeing people again in person. I'm excited to unlock those opportunities that really come with in-person learning. And, I'm excited to really be able to see the inspiration in students' eyes when they get to give their speech, or when they get to hear from someone that they admire. So I think there's lots to be excited about this year.
Thanks, Chris. Next up is Skye.
Yes, so we're still accepting registrations up until late October, so you guys still have time because most of you guys are from the States or internationally. You can travel because the Canadian border is open, so you can come in person, but if you want to come online, we also have online spots. I'm going to put in the chat, there is the link to register if you are interested, or you can email me at sg@suns.org. I'm really inspired because Model UN seems like one of those things that when the pandemic hit might just kind of fizzle out. And I'm really inspired that it's still alive, it's still thriving, we're still planning conferences, we still see the high school students are still so dedicated and so excited to attend. So honestly, I'm so inspired by all the work that organizers have done on their end, but students for wanting to still participate. So I'm really excited and I'm really inspired, yeah.
Thank you, Skye. Ben.
Sure. So I will also drop the link in the chat to register for NAIMUN. We are accepting registrations all the way through January, so you have plenty of time. Register earlier, that way you can get your assignments earlier, and you can also pay less. Two amazing things. I would say my one word is excited. I am so excited to see everyone. I think Skye said this earlier, but the spark is still there. It's something that I was afraid wouldn't be as we went virtual, but it's been so fun to see so many people excited. Also, please, my piece of advice is get in contact with us. At least on our end, we are all nerds. We would love to talk to you. It is so much more fun than paying attention in class. Email us. I'll drop the email in the chat as well, but please get in contact with us. And we are so excited to see everyone.
Thanks, Ben. And next, Kevin.
So I'll share my word is hopeful. And that's the, I think, sentiment that the students have, or we hope they have about the world, but also how the sentiment we have about the students. Model UN didn't go away. In fact, it thrived in some avenues during last year. And so that forms an even stronger baseline of students that will want to do Model UN both in person and in virtually this coming year. And these students will grow up to become the leaders of the Model UN clubs in a couple of years from now. They will be running the conferences in college. So there's so much potential out there, and they just got to get started. Kind of like what John said, just go to a conference, start planning out your schedule. Don't make it too hard for yourself. Just pick something that is feasible for your school and build your schedule around that, get started, and the hope will turn into reality. And I'll drop the Best Delegate one in learnmodelun.com, and you can find the conferences there.
I want to thank all of our panelists again, and I think you all are the epitome of excited, the epitome of generous with your time and your resources, as are the programs that you're a part of. And I'd love to actually share my screen briefly. We got a lot of questions about specific resources, and so I briefly want to share the links again to each of the panelist conferences, other than the one happening this weekend. For those of you that would like to sign up, here are the links again for SUNS, NAIMUN, and NISMAN. And all of these conferences still have registration open, so please feel free to check out their website and contact their awesome coordinators. And if you want to check out the Best Delegate conferences as well, please feel free to check those out. We have Best Delegate Model United Nations conferences happening. Like Kevin mentioned, there are training conferences for new students who don't have any prior experience. There are invitational conferences for experienced students looking to take their skills to the next level. And there are crisis conferences for students that really want to excel and learn how to participate in fast-paced, dynamic crisis conferences. And this year, Best Delegate has monthly conferences. So every month there's conferences available through April. And our conferences in October, we kept registration open. You actually have until October 5th to sign up for our October conferences. We know many schools are just getting started, so please feel free to check that out as well. And we got a number of questions about how do we help students and help student leaders get programs going. And so I also want to mention one other program that Best Delegate is running this coming semester. And also one other resource that you can use. The resource, again, is the new conference database. Georgina will share the links in the chat for both the middle school database as well as the high school database. If you want to find the university database, that's also on our website. It again will show you all of the virtual, all of the in-person, and all of the hybrid conferences, so you can find conferences that work best for your school. And if you have students that are looking to really boost up their skills, boost up their experience, are looking to be guided by a mentor and take their skills to the next level, Best Delegate is running 10-week online teams. So please also feel free to check those out. We have beginner teams, intermediate teams, crisis teams, and leadership teams. So if you have a school program where you really need some student leaders to gain skills to help build up your program, we have programs called Leading Yourself, where students can learn the leadership skills they need to be a better student leader. We have club officer training, as well as chair training. We have a service learning Model UN for All team, where students are going to get to volunteer with the Model UN community. And we also have a college admissions team for seniors looking to figure out how to tell their story and focus on their Model UN experience. So Model UN teams are open. Please check out our website for that. The registration deadline is October 1st for Model UN teams, and they start the week of October 18th. And most importantly, just like the rest of the team members, I also am happy to answer any questions that you have. Please feel free to reach out with additional questions about Model UN conferences or about any of Best Delegate's programming. The best email that we respond to very, very fast at Best Delegate is support@bestdelegate.com. So I recommend reaching out to us there, or our phone number. Georgina, one of our amazing mentors, answers all of your questions about our conferences and programs. And I just want to say thank you again to all of our incredible panelists, to all of our students, and to all of our teachers for joining us. We are so excited that Model UN is happening. We can't wait to have you be a part of this Model UN season, whether that's virtual, in-person, hybrid, or a combination of all of it. We are very, very excited that you are inspiring and empowering your students through Model UN. So thank you all so much for joining us. For those of you who are here live, great to meet you and answer your live questions. For those of you watching this after the fact, please also feel free to add comments or write into us. We're happy to answer those as well. And we really just want to say thank you and have a great evening.